Hey everybody, it's been a little while since I talked about the real estate market. I mean a couple of weeks, which seems like forever nowadays. Um, and the last time that I did something like this, we were still at the beginning of the whole crisis, and everyone was kind of wondering what was happening. Everyone was pulling back a bunch, but now here we are. It's past April 15th, and the one metric that I was looking at was whether or not mortgage default rates would go up. To me, that was kind of like the big to do because that's really going to tell whether or not people have decided to stop paying their mortgages. And the data is in. It's still not widely available, but just from contacts I have in the lending space, I'm hearing that the pay rate is about the same. I mean, it's gone. Mortgage default rates have gone up a tiny bit, but not much. Not like this drastic. 10 or 15% of people are not paying their mortgages. So for the time being, we seem to be okay. And all of the stimulus checks come in, so people are theoretically going to be using that to make their mortgage payments. And the multifamily sponsors that I've been talking to are seeing some pullback in making their rent, but their payment rates are still in like the 85% plus when it would normally be like 95% plus. So there's definitely some impact, but not a ton. Now May, it's April, right? May is going to be the real like test to see, are people going to default in May and see what the rates do then. The stimulus check should make an impact there, but that's really going to be kind of the big difference. Now, something else that I've found out about in lending, which I thought was pretty cool, is that a lot of the refinances that lenders are seeing come in are basically to get runway cash. So right now, you may not know this, but we're sitting on an all-time high in home equity. 37% of all American homeowners own their homes outright in cash, right? Which I just think is just kind of crazy cool. It's amazing that that number to me is very high. Um, but refinances are coming along and people are actually pulling cash out of their homes to survive the dip and the runway. So if they're having to go a month or two, they'll use that refinance to make it through those months. So that actually gives us a little bit more cushion than we've had in the past because of that refinance ability, because of all that home equity. Now, a lot of people are looking at this going like, oh no, is this another crazy, real estate market crash? I can just say that just based on our limited experience just with our clients, we've had several listings that have gone multiple offerings underneath the COVID crisis. So it's not slowing them down in that. We've got other listings that aren't doing that, but the fact that we're still getting them is pretty impressive to me. It says that like there's still plenty of buyers out there. Inventory has gone up a little bit. It was at like 11 or 1200 last month, and we're up to 1400 and change in Austin, which is still squarely a seller's market. So we haven't reached a cliff yet. In another 30 days, it'll be interesting to see what the May default rates look like and how we come out of the crisis and the lockdown and all that stuff. But there are five key things I think that are different this time than they were around like 2008, 2010. I mean, of course, these are unprecedented economic times because you just can't say that word enough. But one notable difference is that appreciation is very different now than it was then. Right up to 2008 to 2009, the average annual home appreciation each year was really like 8.5%. So it was quite a bit. There's a huge run up. And now in the last 6 years, nationwide, appreciation has really only been like about 5%. So we haven't had quite the price run up that we had in 2008, 2010. Another interesting point is that housing credit is actually not as available as it was in 2008. There's a meta value for how available housing credit is for housing lending. And in June of 2006, it peaked at 868. And that's just a meta value for how easy it is to get credit. And today that meta value is 152. So it's like a sixth of what it was before then. So it's still decently hard to get money. And lenders are also tightening their belts, so it's going to be even harder still. So it's not like the money is really loose out there to buy up a bunch of stuff. And it's not like there's a bunch of inventory to buy anyway, at least not in Austin. And so back to the buyer's market, seller's market part, in 2008, 2010, it was definitely a buyer's market nationwide, and we're still squarely in a seller's market. So that's the third part that's different than before. And then this I thought was really interesting. Before I was mentioning that home equity was, 37% of homes are owned outright in cash. Well, now home equity is still at super high levels, and we had a bunch of people using their houses as cash machines back in the previous housing crisis. And there was 824 billion was the peak of the refi money coming out of people's houses, and that is a combination of years 2005, 2006, and 2007. If you look at 2017, 18, and 19, that refi amount is 232 billion. So only a fourth of as much money is pulled out of people's houses, which also just goes right back to the point of that equity is really high. So right now, 27% of mortgages have at least 50% equity in their homes, and 37% of homes are owned outright. So people have a lot more runway to refinance their home and hopefully not have it foreclosed on if COVID lasts much longer. Now, as far as like coming out of COVID, there's really no way to do a perfect landing on this thing. You figure the lockdown was started before we're at where we're at now, and there's no point in the future where lifting the lockdown, the conditions will be better than they were when we started the lockdown. So if that's the case, then in theory, you would be in lockdown until you had 100% immunity, 100% vaccination. I think this also just goes back to American culture. We want everything to be 100% safe, 100% effective, and life just isn't like that. So I don't really know how we're going to come out of this, perfectly, unless you wanted to wait until there was a vaccine, which would be like 18 months. So if you do that, then like the economy just can't be off for 18 months. There's just no way. Whether you're left or right, you just can't turn things off for that long. So at some point, we're going to have to come out of our shell and go back to work and live with COVID among us. There's just no way to just stay in place until it goes away, because there's no point at which we could lift the ban and be in a better situation than before. So I imagine that we're going to have to watch R naught, which is the value of whether or not the virus is spreading. And if it stays below 1, then okay, you can work. And if it goes above 1, then we might have to do more lockdowns. I'm not sure. I would love to be back to business as usual. But I'm hoping that we'll be able to get back to work, at least in some limited capacity, along with social distancing. And if we've got recovered people whose antibodies can be used to treat other people who are infected, hopefully that'll prevent the hospitals from getting overloaded. And we can, at some point, get back to some regular semblance of work. At that point, if things do go back to normal, we'll see if there is a bounce back, and all the pent-up demand that we're not seeing hit the market would, in theory, come back. Although I'm really a little surprised at how robust we're seeing buyers still go out and buy homes at this point. I don't know if people are just sick of it, or they're just deciding like, hey, I'm going to take the risk. But there's still a decent amount of activity. Now, people are still very cautious. They wipe everything down with Clorox wipes. They're wearing masks. They're doing all the regular precautions to go into homes. But I still don't know how that's going to fall out entirely. I do know that we just do have a lot of equity runway to let this thing run out. So it just depends on whether or not that equity runs out before we get back to some sort of semblance of business as usual. I just don't know which one's going to happen first. The next big date in my mind, of course, is May 15th. That's when that's when the next mortgage payments are due and will be considered late. So I'm really curious to see what the default rate is in May. And if we have to go much longer than that, then who knows, man, all bets are off. So anyway, that's my take on it today, and it's changing just day by day. And if I got anything more, I'll let you know next time in a week or so. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll check y'all later.